Okay, we are rolling. And I'm joined today with the homie, Ricky Z. He's a local sauna owner here in Boulder, astrology wizard, and just general mystical aficionado. What else? How else would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, what's going on, fam? Name's Ricardo Zever. I'm one of the co-owners of Ember and Ice out here in West Boulder, and I'm a fellow astrologer, transformational life coach. We've been running astrology for the last 17 years. So, meeting up with my man here, Ben, going to be dropping into the ethers and talking 2020, 25, and beyond. And I don't know, man. Take it away. Whatever you feel is up the alley for today. But definitely talking about how we can best evolve ourselves to not only touch our own internal worlds, but reach the collective at a new statement of embodiment and illumination on how we can bring our skill sets in transformative new ways.
Yeah. A beautiful intro. So I just want to, maybe let's open it up with just your astrological forecast prediction, because you are legitimately a wizard. Like, I see you post stuff on Instagram.
Thanks,
and I turn it on and like keep it rolling. Is literally just what's in the ether today. So what is in the ether nowadays? June 3rd?
We are rocking here June 3rd, 2025. I appreciate that, Ben. So what I want to make known is my journey with astrology is trying to just find if it's real or not. Is this, I'm a Sag. It's, you're adventurous and truth-seeking, yada yada. But how truthful is this? What is the validity of this actual practice? And so I basically could summarize it. For 10 years, I've recorded every day on my calendars, and you just can't look back after you've seen so much. Within this, I'd like to do a day-to-day forecast just to kind of get people a little bit of the tonality. There's so much depth that we can reach, but really you want to be able to know how you're using your day's energy. It gets more video game, it gets more ether as we kind of look into this, and it helps us kind of understand how we can best navigate what is to show up in our day-to-day lives. Pause.
I'll
be right back.
Yep.
Patience is in paramount, bro. I apologize.
Oh, You're good, dude. Yeah. You're good. What's going on 5:30?
So there's actually yoga here with a girl named Maggie.
Nice.
It'll be $15.
Nice.
There's a lot of semantics, man. I'm now taking over all the events even more so.
Cool.
And so, like, some yoga events will come in and you get the whole event and you get a sauna session, so 2-hour bango.
Yeah.
For $15, we're keeping it at 1 hour, so we're negotiating. But basically, you can pay the price of one $25 sesh and have it all. But don't apply to you. You got the hookup. So.
Yeah. Cool. All right,
let's resume. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, you're good, dude. So we'll splice that out. But so connecting again. Yeah, take a minute to breathe, bro.
5, 3, 2, send it.
Yeah, so the astrological forecast for, I guess early June, or just this summer in general, summer 2025. What's going on?
Love it, man. I want you to think of astrology as if you get a text from your phone, that Wi-Fi is going up to a satellite and being right back into your cell phone. We just know it works. We don't ask questions, but it's all being worked with vibrational radio waves, if you will. I want you to think of each planet, the further out you go, the different kind of wavelength that's taking place. And so what I will say is 2025, a lot of major outer planets have all shifted that haven't moved, and some are 12, 8, or 6 years. So it changes the genre of the game that you're in, the saga of the kind of life you're living, the kind of different characters, the different missions, the different situations that could be taking place, regardless if you have the same business or the same relationship. So to chunk it back down is just like, with AI technology, I look at this as a Pluto Aquarius transit, just to leave a little nugget. This will change the whole process at what we're able to create and how we need to come into the marketplace to be competitive. You cannot escape that energy, and Pluto being this like huge magnetic force is still caught in Earth's rotation. It's a gravity you cannot escape. In a way, you need to understand how to work with it in an evolutionary process, but it does connect everybody together. I bring out the far out to bring it into the micro. We're in the Gemini season, man. You're at the end of spring. It's a beautiful time, man, to like really get focused on what's in your immediate environment and be curious and get things going and take questions and also work together with other people. This is kind of where the the dandelion gets caught on the wind and spreads its information far and wide. And so like it's great to really get stimulus going with what are the ideas going on in your mind and really kind of trade ideas. And I mean, such as this process with you, my man. So like, you know,
exactly.
really tap into what's the database in someone else's head, and also where can I find connection in that comprehension.
Yeah. So just to reflect what I'm hearing, this is a time of sowing seeds, of connecting and then sowing seeds.
I would totally agree with that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what we're doing here. Yeah, Ricky's a great dude. We just clicked off the bat kind of just initially. And the more I talk to this guy, the more I'm like, he really knows what's up. He's got really interesting perspectives, not just on astrology, but on a lot of interesting stuff. We were talking about my, what do you even call it? Brand, my vision, my vision, I guess you could say, for what I want to offer, why I make these videos, why I make my Instagram videos. And yeah, it was really interesting to see how they align, your vision and my vision. So
yeah, man, the way I've gotten to understand Ben in the short amount of time is his comprehension with Buddhist teachings, but how to kind of break the matrix, move into the ethers of like how we can really connect to an overarching part of ourselves. And there's, you know, we were using the concept of emptiness the other day as if you were really tapping into the internal void. And as far out as some of these concepts may be, they really are to help you understand, like, you can constantly be co-creating yourself. You have a constant, infinite opportunity to co-create yourself and rediscover who you are as a person.
Boom. Yeah, no, I mean, I like how you said that. I mean, my whole shtick is rooted in this understanding of emptiness. But that is not, again, that is not some meaningless, scary, empty place. It's actually full of infinite possibilities. And when we have a personal relationship, personal direct connection to our own emptiness, we understand the malleability of everything that we are, including thoughts, feelings, experience, sense of self, sense of world. It's fluid and malleable. And I guess that's what I want to bring. And when I really sink into my vision, it really is taking, again, shunyata, emptiness, making this digestible, which is possible for the general public. And I mean, my vision really is like changing the world. Not for anyone to believe anything in particular, but to recognize that no matter what they believe, it's going to be empty. And belief includes senses of what you think you are, senses of what you think the world is. It's beyond like real and unreal. Recognizing, again, no matter what narrative we hold, no matter what worldview we hold, it's going to be against a backdrop of emptiness. And the metaphor I like to use, if we're gonna be poetic with it, is it's like a campfire and there's sparks flying in the sky. But those sparks, they fade into the blackness of that void of the night sky. So whatever we project onto experience, including, again, the narrative of who we are, what the world is, and when I say who, it could be Ben, what, it could be a human, and what the world is, this kind of materialistic lens that we've been conditioned to believe, all of those are just sparks in the night sky. And given enough time, will fade. And there'll be new sparks. And can we recognize that? That worldviews, for instance, have, again, what was the worldview of human beings 5,000 years ago in the Amazonian rainforest? What world did they inhabit cognitively, mentally, through narrative, that was then projected on their lived experience? Or what about the days of Christ or pre-Christ? What worldview were they holding? I guarantee it was very different than the reductionist, materialist lens that we've been conditioned. And then can we extrapolate that into the future? Where it's like, okay, if our worldview has changed so drastically in thousands, even hundreds of years, what will it be like in this new AI age in 100 years, 500 years? Seriously. And can we recognize the emptiness of the view that seems so real right now? We have this conditioned belief that, oh, the world I'm living in now, this is clearly the way that it is, objectively speaking. And that in Buddhism is the root delusion. I mean, it applies to not just the world, but senses of self, senses of reality in general. But it's when we think that what I experience is fundamentally, objectively, inherently real, that's where we get trapped in actually what is our own mental projections. So again, I hope if people get at all what I'm saying, that you understand the possibility in this, because there is quite a bit of potential to deconstruct what the Buddhist would call unskillful views, things that induce suffering, induce senses of isolation, separation, fear. We can deconstruct those things because they're empty. There's no solidity there, actually. And then from that place of radical deconstruction, we have the opportunity to consciously and with intention reconstruct. What are the narratives, the beliefs, the assumptions that are running my life? Not just running my life, but that I am walking through. Because again, we take on these beliefs, these narratives and assumptions, and take them to be real. Often this is unconscious. It's not even a choice. It just is, we take in data and then we project it and then we walk through that world. So the skill is deconstructing, reconstructing. And my real question is, what is the limit of the worlds that we can construct, including a world rich with gods, rich with poetic narratives of experience of self, dripping with acceptance and openness to death, endings, all of that? What is the possibility there?
I really find that there's infinite possibility, because I really think the opposite of emptiness, and we can toy with this idea, is identification. And identification, though, I think is more fluid than humans would want it to be, and I think that's where we get so trapped in the ego, so to speak.
When you say identification, I just want to clarify what exactly you mean by that.
The way I understand this is that in the void of possibilities, there's decision to say something is this or that, or should be here, or should be there, and there's a part of an identification of how we make it. This chair could be made of plastic or wood, and until we formulate it in a certain fashion, do we give it an identification? But it's malleable. If I pulled this off, it'd be a broken chair or whatever have you, but at the end of the day, is wood. So I think it's very fluid to say, like, when something's identified. In the emptiness of what anything could possibly be, it could be done in 50 million things. I could turn it into a boomerang in a second. I could turn it into a tool. And I say, as a human being, I think in the emptiness of the void, the more that identification is more fluid. And I look at it as like a very fire element kind of thing, and that ether is changing and transformation ongoing, that I am what I eat, and part of my body will transform and change, and one day I could be this person, the next day I could be a complete different person with the right intention. And so within that emptiness, I think we kind of get this safety mechanism of like, oh well, I'm this identity. And like, I think what I really receive from you, Ben, and also which corresponds in the astrology from certain perspectives of me, which is the sign of Aries, is very much like the face, the identity. I'm not an empty page till I've identified it to be something. But we also need to know that it takes ongoing action, ongoing habits that almost become more representative of a sense of self. And so, like, I think we understand that in the void of emptiness, you'll get trapped thinking, oh, this is all I am, when you can continuously keep progressing and evolving.
That's a great point. And you said a lot of great things I want to just touch down on briefly. First was saying this chair, like, you could repurpose it into a boomerang. It could be infinite different things.
Pause.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
No, go for it.
I'll be right back.
Let's just keep going.
You want to take a deep breath and fly into it?
Yeah, let's just keep going.
So,
I mean, bro, we can edit all this out.
Great. So, resumed.
All right, so again, Ricky is still on the clock, working the sauna. And we are intermittently taking breaks for him to attend to the sauna goers, as well as attending to the fire in there. So we're back, and we're talking about emptiness, and we're talking about applying emptiness to the world that we experience. So the example that we used was this chair, and how this chair is empty of inherent existence, in the sense that it depends on your mind to create this thing we call a chair. And the classic example of understanding emptiness is if we were to burn this chair, there is a point when this chair would become ash. And the question is, we throw this chair in the fire, it's burning. At what point does it cease to be a chair? Because you could say when you throw it in the fire, it's still a
Right,
chair.
right.
But when it turns to ash, what is that point where it is no longer a chair and now it's ash?
Right.
You can see there's an arbitrary kind of delineation there. And that is kind of an understanding of the emptiness of conceptual overlays. So we can apply this to the chair, we can apply this to the sense of self.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is an idea or concept that I really want to kind of just experiment with, really, because as you were speaking to it, Ben, of emptiness, as I understand in astrological terms, we look at Aries as the sense of self, as the state of fire, and it's interesting to look at this, but to bring it back to how I connected it with you is that in the emptiness void, anything can be co-created or destroyed, if you will. And so to use the chair as an analogy is just, like I could rip off this and turning it into something else. And like what you said is like, where do we define it? From not being a chair into a state of ash.
Yeah.
And so that's a funny thing when we bring it back to the sense of self, is like, where do I discover that? Like, I've done something once. Well, I can't really say I'm a dancer, an actor, like an artist or whatever have you. But until I've done it, to what extent?
Right.
To where does it become such a state of me where it's become habitual to now it's identified with a sense of self and then identified by others is in a state of recognizing that sense of being.
That's so interesting. I mean, what's coming up for me is you see a lot of people take up hobbies and then start to identify themselves with them. It's almost like the ego finds some sort of stability, and now I'm a wrestler, now I'm a climber, now I'm a mountain biker, now I'm a singer, now I'm a dancer, now I'm a musician. And you can feel it in yourself too. Where do I identify with being a musician? And how many times do I have to play a guitar to be a musician? And then there's this whole idea of, oh, he's not a real musician, he's a poser. He's not a real mountain biker. He's not, you climb sometimes, but you're not a climber. And you see the emptiness of these delineations where we can start to play with identity. Where it's like, okay, if you never have been on a mountain bike, it's hard to call yourself a mountain biker. But recognizing the emptiness of that delineation, that identity, because there's a difference between the activity and then identifying as a doer of this activity, for instance. So, and again, recognizing it's all empty. Like,
Totally.
and this comes down to self-concepts, which I think psychotherapeutically, there's a lot of potential in understanding self-concepts of, I'm a failure, never did anything with my life, I'm a loser, look at everyone else, I just don't measure up. These are self-concepts, but like when we recognize the emptiness of any self-concept, what is causing you to believe those narratives, those unskillful, painful narratives? Like, what is it? Is it the fact that you feel like you're, we'll just use the example of a failure. I feel like I'm a failure, thus it must be true. Or I have thoughts saying that I'm a failure, so that means it must be true. Or it's just an emotion, or people treat me like I'm a failure. What is it? What is the data that actually defines that narrative? And can we start to just become curious to deconstruct these narratives that, I mean, for a lot of people, can cripple someone their whole lives when they're empty. But actually, it's the inability to really become curious and pay attention to what is this feeling of a failure? What is this thing called a failure? When we really get in there, and in my language, I say when we shine the light of awareness on that dark, scary stuff, you see there's nothing dark and scary here, actually. Maybe it's feelings. Okay, there's some feelings here. It's like, oh, this contraction in my chest. I feel this sense of I should. Again, that can be in the mind. We can say there's, mental chatter. There's physical feelings, emotional states, and maybe some narratives in the mind as well. And when we start to break it down, we can see this, like, where is the failure here? We can say it actually is arbitrary. And in that example too, you can just start to poke holes in that narrative where whose definition of failure are we going by? Where it's like, is this a culturally conditioned narrative? Where I need X amount of money, a certain amount of intimate partners, all these fun experiences, or else I'm not enough. And can we recognize that's a empty, culturally conditioned narrative? While still honoring the reality of it, because these narratives become our lived experience, right? And the deeper we go into these conversations, the more that reality and imagination start to merge. And we can see my imagined story of who I thought I was, and my imagined story of what I thought the world was, starts to become my lived real experience, where all of a sudden imagination and reality, it's not that simple. It starts to again blend and merge, and we can't. Where is the distinction between imagined experience and the real one? From the lens of emptiness, you could say there actually is no distinction other than the one we make.
Sure.
And so that again the potential in that for healing, as well as like optimizing experience. Let's just put it like that.
Sure. Honestly, something that I've toyed with or thought about many different times is this human boundary that we create to construct things. For example, like a game. If it's a chess game or a game of basketball or something, in the chessboard analogy, it's just a pieces of wood that we've given identification to that will at one point follow some state of rules that equal a winner or a loser to some extent in that particular game of chess, hypothetically speaking. And with basketball, at the end of the day, it's just a piece of plastic that's flying through the air. But where is the orchestration of energy reached a certain construct where we claim that is actually a winning game, but it's all conceptual rules that have just been agreed upon somewhere. But there could be a distinction that's lost on what that identification means. Because I think Muhammad Ali would say, you're not a failure if you don't get back up again. And so no matter how many times you fail, you could even say that brings more potential into the redemption story to maybe make an even greater win than what it has once been. Through the embers of failure even helps constitute a bigger win in that resistance. So it's all about the construct of what people have identified as such. And I think it comes right back to what you were saying about emptiness in the void, because all this potential combustion to what wants to come into being, and I think there is a point, though, there is some moments that there are structures we live in where, like, playing a musical note, isolated C is just a note, and you might hear a beautiful piece of music, but it's really just all of these isolated notes played in a way that now we as a human species have identified, oh, that's a flowing piece of music, it has an arithmetic to it, and now it's created from chaos to order. Where is the order, and what is real and what is not truth? Is in question.
I mean, you said some amazing things there, and so first the music analogy, which is a singular note. It has no context, and in a sense, what makes music beautiful is the narrative sequence of notes. You got to have the minor fall and the major lift, right? It's like it adds to the context. Experience is contextual. We can't have my present moment without my understanding of what my past was, my understanding of self, my past self, who I want to be. These are all necessary components. And you also talked about sports. And I want to just emphasize how immersive sports are when you play them. Volleyball, basketball, football. When you are really in it, it's all that's real to you. It's the only thing that matters.
Pull you into the moment for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so is life. So is this game of, in modernity, a lot of it is rooted in this materialistic pursuit of gain. And it's not just, material things, but it can also be the amassing of experiences. This is the game we play. Well, did you go to Thailand last year? Did you go to the Bahamas? Check out my new Maserati. I don't know. Are you really winning? Because it looks like I'm winning. It's like that's the game we now play. And can we, even though it's very immersive and we feel so consumed and it feels so real, do we have the ability to step back, keep stepping back until we can see it for what it is, which is just a game? And then how does that affect our experience when we recognize, oh, this is a game? And actually, in order for me to feel like a winner or a loser, I have to actively choose to participate. So
Yeah.
is this a game I want to play?
Sure.
You know, like, and there, you know,
Sure.
and that's the thing. So you look at other cultures, for instance, in India, there are wandering sadhus. These are like holy men in the Hindu faith. And these sadhus wander with nothing. They beg for money, they beg for food. And our culture doesn't have anything like that, really. Doesn't have anything where we kind of glorify those who have forsaken material existence, really, in order to find something, I guess, immaterial.
And maybe just in Western or American culture, so to speak. This is great, honestly, Ben. And one thing you brought up, though, is even, well, who or where did we give credence to accepting that? Because what you said, I understand, has a level of truth to it, where we're looking at, you know, at least in hyper exploited masculine culture of like what you said about the Maserati and the gone to Thailand or whatever the case may be, depending, and I know that the feminine has its own interpretation of that for sure, you know.
Totally.
But my point is, like, where did we all agree that is an ideological idea of success? Like, you know, where that, let's break the emptiness of that. And like, how many people does it take to say it's a trend? how many people talk about it in conversation that it becomes a thing? And because actually you could just not give credence to that and it wouldn't be a thing.
Yeah.
You know, it has to be, it seems to be at least agreed upon by multiple different parts of multiple people, if you will, multiple different headspaces to agree upon the ideology. Where at a sports game, to bring it back for 1 second, everyone cheers at excitement because they've all agreed upon the structure of the game. And so, like, you know, what I'm really hearing in the emptiness is like, is that a game we even want to play, as you just so put it? And like, what even defines it? And also to catch ourselves in the emptiness of like, if you don't want to participate in the game, make your own game. And is still just as accessible.
And this game analogy goes really deep, and I love it. So thank you for bringing it up, because it is like...
Pause.
Yeah.
Game.
Shit.
Game. No, just I'll be faster than you.
Yeah. This is a great conversation, though. These cultural expectations and experiences of winning or losing, for example, being a success or being a failure, these are culturally conditioned, yet they are experiences very real. Just like when you lose a basketball game, you feel like a loser and you feel like you lost, but okay, how real was that game? So there's a fine line between, again, imagination and reality, where we imagine this game called basketball. And then we play it based on the rules we come up with. And if we lose, we're a loser. But and it is real, right? It is real. You lost.
Definition to the game, sure.
But again, do we have access to zooming out and be like, oh, this is a game, and actually, who cares? So this is where it gets kind of tricky, because in order to...
Point of view I usually have in learning to grow from a loss is, did you have a good time? But it depends. But I hear what you're saying as far as, especially if it was a tournament or something.
Totally. And that's the thing. I mean, there's nothing wrong. I mean, at pretty deep level, there's nothing wrong with feeling like a quote unquote loser. Actually, depends on your relationship to that experience. But I would say, and you know, how it motivates you, or if it makes you contract and isolate, whatever. But I would say also, if we are to change the game, if we're going to change the game that we live by, the games, then we have to come up with new ones. Because the question is if I don't play this game, what game do I play?
Right.
What do I put my energy?
Sure.
And that's the thing. If it's not into money or in amassing experiences, where do we go? And this brings me to actually something pretty deep and pretty, I mean, quote unquote, spiritual. I don't love the word spiritual, but a reference to, because when you use the word spiritual, you imply that there's something in creation that is not spiritual, right? It's like almost a subtle duality that we create.
Interesting.
So a different game to play, instead of sort of this flat materialistic pursuit or the kind of accumulation of experiences and things, which I mean leads to greed, wealth inequality, a lot of shitty things happening to human beings. What if there was a more, instead of the horizontal dimension, a vertical dimension, where we can invest that desire deeply into this present moment, nothing outside of this. the ability to sink into the body and what's present there, and as a means of accessing joy, beauty, acceptance, depth, poetic narratives of what is this moment, recognizing it's empty. What are we calling this? What are we living in right now? And can we start to transform experience? Again, recognizing that the narratives we hold about this present moment becomes our lived experience. So if I say this is just Ben and Ricky, which is valid at one level, but if that's the only level I have of interpreting experience, we're limiting ourselves. We're limiting the potential of the human mind. To say that this is also, we could say, two divine beings that are actually not separate from source. Two beings that exist beyond time, that have somehow ended up right here and right now. And if we start to play with that narrative, who is this person in front of me right now? Even person is a tough word to use.
Sure.
But what is this thing in front of me? What is this being? Where did they come from? Who am I talking to right now? And can we tap into maybe the divinity in this person, in his face? And how does that affect the being? And knowing that these are conditioned experiences, it's neural pathways. Do we have access to training a different neural pathway where I can see the divinity in this person, saying every word, every movement is not separate from the source of all things?
Sure.
And again, that kind of vertical dimension as a way to invest our energy into something that in the long run will be much more meaningful.
Pause. Perfect. What's up, Kim?
Doing great, man.
Good to see you.
Where does it that we have the inspiration and intention to find one's own emptiness and redefine it as such?
Totally.
I think there's something powerful there of like where we get to co-create the experience. And you can look at that, oh, it's a rainy day, but maybe everyone prays for the rains to come, you know? So what is it that is more rejuvenating in your perspective? What can you take away that we can set and forth for, you know, where someone thinks they're winning or losing, you can always bring it back to a higher state of mind, a higher vibration.
And we are getting poured on right now, but you just,
real.
I mean, you just sparked a lot of stuff in me, which is like, how can we kind of restructure our own understanding of our own emptiness? Because we all have that, but it's like, how do we relate to it? Are we running away from this emptiness? And this is a big part of psychotherapy, is people are running from something, some hollow void. We think, oh, it's personal, something's wrong with me. This is inherent in every being. There's going to be lack. In that void, we try to fill it with infinite things. And it's paradoxically when we start to actually allow that void to be there, when we find we actually don't have to fix it. We can have this infinite hollowness actually and have it be okay. And then again, we can radically transform our experience from that. And but you got to do almost the unacceptable. If you've been living your life resisting this emptiness, this void forever, then that resistance is going to actually manifest suffering. And when we stop resisting, it sounds, again, at first, like we're accepting utter defeat, that, you know what, my life is just this hollow, meaningless experience, and that's what it is. That can be the feeling at first of accepting emptiness. But over time, you're like, oh, everything's empty, and I have this hollow void, and you know what? That's okay. And you know what? The sun will shine, and I think I'm going to go dancing tonight. You know what I mean? All of a sudden, that's what's on the other side of going into that void. So I love that you took it there. Yeah, just being able to, I guess, restructure your life from the inside out. And then how do we do that?
I know they aren't the biggest questions. I mean, you asking collectively, rhetorically, or my own perspective?
I think, I mean, most people would probably be interested in personally, but I think, I mean, the personal and the collective are kind of, you know, you can't really separate the two. So I guess you could say both, either personally or collectively. How do we rewrite these stories and live new ones?
I think we all need to agree and understand that some things that have been agreed upon, such as a game, such as a chess game, or if some of these analogies we use, they do have their profound contact of like, that is real. And I don't think we should disassociate from those parts that are real, because in the emptiness they were created to some extent. And I think giving more acknowledgement to what is than disassociating from it is going to be very liberating And I find that, there are some new games and new intentions that come through this emptiness that I think it allows us to put us more in the hot seat to being creative. And I think there's more acceptance to actually not trying to judge or contain things as such. I think by emptying your identifications on certain things, I think it allows room to create something that's never been done before. Yeah. And then basically you're never losing is one thought I have in this analogy. There could be a way that you have different talents and skill sets for the human individual, but if we're speaking very philosophically and metaphorically for others, I think there's a way that we can actually look at everything is in our benefit, that the world is working for us and not against us in that way. And I think there's a space-time area where that could be the redemption stories. I mean, I think of Michael Jordan that literally got canceled from his own high school basketball team and is now has its own definition. You say you're the Michael Jordan of something, you're the greatest of all time, so to speak. And so it comes from that redemption of like, what is a failure and what is a winner? I mean, in the emptiness, accepting, wow, I lost today, but in the emptiness, I'm going to create. This is only just the beginning of all things, and we can look at that perspective in infinite ways.
And you can create that context. Again, we are living in narratives. So if my narrative is, I took an L today, and that's that, and I'm a loser, and all that, and then the mind just goes on those stories. Or we can say, I took an L today, but guess what? I'm going to get up, and I'm going to grab life by the balls. I'm going to make it my bitch. Because when I take L's, I get back up every damn time. So guess what? It's not if, it's when. That's a different story to inhabit, and it leads to a very different felt experience, right? One that is contractive, and you can, I'm just going to isolate. I'm just going to smoke some weed and just kind of watch some Netflix and just fade into my bed. That's, one flavor.
Right.
Or I'm not going to give up. I'm going to get after it and see what I can do. And at a really deep, ultimate level, none is better than the other. But really be honest with yourself. Recognizing, again, the malleability of any of these narratives and the reality of them. Because people have this idea, but, if I get up and try, maybe I win, but I'm still a loser, or whatever. It's still, we have this idea that there is one way that we are. Yeah. And that is where we get stuck, because there is not one way. It's completely and utterly malleable. And so that's where I think, real work is actually. Right. What am I believing right now? Because predominantly it's unconscious. And this is where something like meditation is so useful, because your narratives will become obvious. And with at least even some exposure to the understanding of emptiness, you can say, oh, this is an empty belief. This fucking sucks. What am I believing right now about myself? What am I believing about my story, my narrative, about where I'm going in life? And do I want to believe that? And so there's a lot of potential in that. And I think it really opens up life, honestly. And what do you say? Do you think we should call it for now? Or do you got any closure statements?
I guess in closure is, I really appreciate all these concepts, and even bringing it out here in the Void Man is like, you can look back at some of the greatest things have yet to fruition, and sometimes you're looking at data from one vocal point, but there's always, I shared this the other day, a black swan event. So you can look at all the data that's been presented, and you can probably have some trajectory on how things will go. And I think our mind thinks that they have it all figured out from looking at data, and it creates a belief system after a while. When the black swan effect is just something that I brought up because you could have all the data figured out for the economy of the world before the internet was invented. And when the internet invents, the entire economy takes a radical shift. As I will see with AI, now there's a radical shift for one thing or another. But I'll say this, like the bamboo takes about 6 years of doing nothing, just dormant, just grounding, just becoming one with its foundation and kind of illuminating where it's going to shoot up and grow, basically. It's having that kind of trajectory built in its life system. And you could look at the data and be like, this thing's dead, this thing's not growing, there's
Yeah.
nothing happening. And then for some reason in the 6-year mark for something, the evolutionary train, the hidden tap to potential of data that's within that life form of the bamboo shoots up and erupts in just a short amount of months.
Interesting.
And so like, I think it's really intriguing that unless you knew that one piece of data, you could create an entire belief system upon what is it. But in the emptiness, something is co-created in that area. And so allow those opportunities to come to you and not shut off the gates of being. Allow that the emptiness allows no boundaries to sense of being.
And what's interesting is I didn't even know that about bamboo. It lies dormant for 6 years. And what's interesting is the Buddha
Correct
actually...
me on that if I got the timeline wrong, but I think it's 6 years.
If it is 6 years, that's interesting because it took the Buddha 6 years to become enlightened. And you can see, relate it to that story, which is, this guy's wandering around doing nothing, starving himself basically to death. It doesn't look like there's much happening there. And then, tick, 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 boom. Radical enlightenment. And it's like you can't
Change a generation.
Right. I mean,
millennia.
That ripple of a human being changed the trajectory of humanity's fate. Let's just put it like that. Same with someone like Christ. I mean, same with also all of us. We all have an impact. We all have the potential to leave deeper ripples too. It depends. What do you want to leave? And power, impact. These are all transient things that is, in a real sense, taking place in a timeless void. So at the end of the day, who fucking cares? That's one lens, that's one extreme. But at the other lens, this mythopoetic narrative that we are inhabiting, these views, that these thoughts, these feelings that come, again, directly from source, can we honor that? And if I want to leave an impact, if I recognize something true in me that I want to give to the world, can I be okay with that? Can I say, yeah, I'm willing to work. I'm willing to sacrifice my time, my energy, even my peace of mind in order to fulfill this vision, to leave that impact. Because let's just say the Buddha didn't even want to teach until I think it was years after his enlightenment, and someone was like, you have to teach this stuff. And he finally started. But it's like, kind of sucks when you're dealing with a bunch of people all the time who don't understand what the fuck you're talking about. Sure. And again, we all have the ability to change the trajectory of human history, and we have to recognize that. I think that a lot of the times the only limits that we have on our impact is the ones we set on ourselves. You want to learn a skill, you want to go back to school, you want to empower people, you want to connect, great. You can do it. You have the internet, you have ChatGPT, you can figure out infinite ways to get these things done.
More tools than
exactly.
ever.
And do we recognize that we are the only things in creation that could ever limit ourselves? Only thing. Even the culturally conditioned narratives that feel so real, they take your belief, you're giving your power to these conditioned, say, limitations. Or when the culture says, who are you to think you can leave such an impact? Like the Buddha, who are you to achieve utter enlightenment, to recognize the nature of perception? Who do you think you are? And my response would be, who do you think you're not? You are creation in entirety right here and now. Who do you think you're not to rise to the occasion like that? And again, who creates these limitations? Could it be only us? And for me, there's a lot of responsibility actually in recognizing that. And it can be hard for people to hear that because, it applies to also how we're creating our experiences, including the suffering. And when we recognize that we're creating the suffering, it can be a lot of baggage. It can be a lot of, again, responsibility. The mind can say, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. But again, it's a part of the maturation of consciousness to recognize our responsibility in the creation of anything we experience. And that includes the limitations or the lack of limitations that we put on ourselves to accomplish what I would say spirit wants through this form. What does spirit want through this body, through this mind, through this ego, quote unquote ego, which is also an expression of spirit.
Right.
Can we open to the flow, the current of desire, recognizing whose desires those are? And then from that lens, it would almost seem sacrilegious in a sense to get in the way of those desires. You know what I'm saying?
I definitely know what you're saying. It's like you all have a role to play in the Dharma. And sometimes in the emptiness, I can say for myself, I've become certain things that I never thought were possible. And that's an acknowledgement for myself. But if I become attached to just me and how that is, there are points to disassociate, if you will. Maybe more so, and I like to bring it back to your concept of emptiness, like, like, well, what else is possible? And just the sheer act of it being possible allows for something to come into being. And so I think it's really revolutionary to kind of bring into, like, you can become anything. I think that belief system is now becoming a little bit more awoken, and that God also, and however you interpret that, of course, source, spirit, the laws of nature, there is an agenda that kind of can perpetuate us to change form and change our destiny. And I think there's moments to actually realize we are in stewardship of that you are chosen in some way. And you can feel it ordained, or in just the simplistic time and place of nature, to be who you are. And find that you can also be beyond, as long as you set in the intention. I think the intention is what sets us apart, of like in the void, in the massive feminine void, you can just set an intention to co-create something. And who's to say you cannot take space up and you cannot be in alignment with that identification? Who says I can't take that piece of metal and turn it into a chair, so to speak, on a cute analogy? Who says that I could not be a musician in this regard, or couldn't be this person? Because there's enough resources to just... But I do think there is a level of combustion. There is a level of perpetuating the energy where then it sustains itself and the internal motion becomes one. And so with that, I just want to name... thanks for starting the fire in a way, Ben.
Yeah, bro. I mean, it's absolutely my pleasure. Yeah. Honestly, I would say I don't even feel like I have a choice. But I mean, you just said a lot. I mean, what came to mind is this concept of alchemy, turning the gunk of life into gold and applying that to consciousness. No matter how fucked you think your mind is, no matter how fucked your life is, at the material level, at the level of consciousness perception, it can be transformed into gold. And it's just alchemical processes. Understanding how the mind and consciousness functions, what sort of, additions we need to throw into the alchemical process in order to refine it to that gold state. No matter what it is, again, if you want to be a musician, what do you have to do? You have to practice. You have to be willing to suck. You have to be willing to dedicate your time to something. Listen. To listen. Exactly. And so, yeah, I think... And just bringing it to emptiness, I love how you said, we can take some steel and turn it into a chair. And just like our sense of self, when we understand the depth of malleability of that self, we can take this thing that feels like, hard as a fucking diamond, and we can actually turn it to liquid. We can restructure this thing at the cellular, molecular level, you could even say, to restructure everything that you thought that you were, beyond conditioned narratives. And that's the thing. I think it's one thing to do this as an individual, but inevitably, when you're as an isolated person trying to create a new sense of self, that's tough. There's a reason people come together in religion, in cultural spheres, to build community, because you get a new sense of self. A new sense of self built on new narratives. We need this to be done in community. Or I do this work, I sit on the meditation cushion 2 hours a day, go in the mountains, eat some mushrooms, whatever. But it's like, you come back and you snap back in to the conditioned experience. You enter the stream, the current of the river of the dominant narrative. But when you do this in community, this is what's so radical about Christ, the Buddha. It was not one person. These are communities. And that's where the power is, where you can start to be in this feedback loop of other people that live in a world similar to yours that may be completely counter to the dominant narrative. And if you have others to reaffirm that and strengthen that and to play off of that, again, you could even look at it like a neural pathway. That neural pathway gets strengthened. Maybe that you are the children of God. And that's just one narrative to play with. But it's, again, from the lens of emptiness, it's equally as real as saying that I'm just Ben and I'm just a bunch of random matter and somehow I ended up here and I'm just kind of alone in this world. It's kind of weird. Don't really know what's going on. That's a narrative that we hold. And it's empty. So what else can we replace that with, So
I love it, man. Just premeditating on
Yeah.
on this concepts here. So really, I love that you kind of re-identified what I was speaking to. Funny enough, it was like a rift, and you made it the alchemical, like bring it into alchemy of like, you can change what was once there. And I like to say this, that even trauma and negativity that has happened in one's life, we like to say all this negative energy, but I do want to say this. And there's astrological practices that bring this up because they're a little bit married with alchemy in the old scripture. But even negative energy you've endured in your life, trauma is energy given into the way that you would want to interpret that. And like even negative energy can be, you find how you look at it is decompose that into fresh soil for it to work with. Find that into dry branches to start a fire with, if you will. The negative energy of anything you've experienced in your life can be used as a resource to fuel in the right kind of way, in the right kind of perspective. And it does start with the mind and the malleability of perception. And I think through the fuel of belief allows you to make it real.
Yeah.
And once there's enough consent into those ideologies, seems maybe the more people that witness it, the more weight is carried in those senses of being. I wonder to question that though. But as long as someone in isolation or with community, there is different outlets to find like, this must be true, and this must be a real part. Now I own it as a part of my identity. But I want to just want to serve into a devil's advocate kind of mindset of just not getting stuck in that identification process, that you can still become more beyond that by allowing yourself in meditation to reach into the void and recreate oneself at all times.
And I like, the alchemical process, and you brought in trauma. And can we view trauma from the alchemical lens? This is what certain depth psychologists like James Hillman have done, where it's like this trauma that we push away. What if this is a gift? Something is giving you a certain set of difficult experiences to break the old you down, break you down, let you decompose, fertilize, ferment, so that there's an alchemical process. And yet we pathologize it, we push it away. We say, oh, let me fix you. Oh, you need meds, to avoid the alchemical process of, the term is negredo. Negredo, this is, you're reducing something to ash, actually. And you need to reduce it. It needs to burn. And we're actually resisting the fire. And when we resist the fire, all of a sudden we stagnate.
Damn.
And we become
so much to get into that.
Yeah, bro. Yeah, but this is not this alchemy. This is not even some far out stuff. The alchemy is an ancient practice it's actually even brought into cutting edge psychology. James Hillman, one of the leading depth psychologists, wrote a whole book on the alchemy of psychology. These are not far away things. These are lenses that we can apply to our real lived experience, especially trauma.
Wow. When you said resist the fire, man, it's resisting. Some of our society is limited to like resist asking out that person, resist feeling the emotions of the situation, resist expressing some facet of your life with someone that matters. And there's this dullness that seems to be popularized. It's really just for protection. And I've noticed that a little bit with, I will speak to other platforms on social media, but like newer generations, us millennials had to deal with kind of the backtrack between the internet age and where it wasn't popular, it wasn't like really well known, and now the communication of everything you do is seen by thousands of millions of people. So I've noticed there's a subculture within today's age of just like, let's not really express. Nothing's really poetic. Nothing's really dynamic nothing really matters. Everything is just a mechanical process that's just eat, consume, eat, fuck, whatever. Right. And everything's meaningless. And there's a level of the meaninglessness, but it's been used with zero form of creation and zero form of, if you will, the fire that allows to extrapolate what is really a lived experience. And so like if there was a spectrum of lived experience from just like basically dead to over the moon, you know, whatever you, this can probably actually doesn't have a roof.
Right.
If I may be so bold.
Right, yeah.
There's actually the coldest temperature you can get to, but there is actually no limit of the hottest temperature that you can reach. You can just keep putting suns together and it technically is immeasurable.
Right. We got 0 Kelvin, but we don't have a limit to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a concept there. Why or where is it when the initiators initiate things in the void? Gone where no one's gone before, that have created something that's never been created before, that is actually illuminating the light in the dark, that is the first people to go dance at the high school dance, if you will, that are like, okay, now we can be led into that void of expression. So, you know, I think each individual person can find that, but allow themselves to burn, not set themselves on fire in a destructive way, but actually like illuminate what is within them.
Yeah.
Something you said there was so huge, in the void. I just see this darkness and where you can actually see again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. That comes from what? The flame. We need to be able to, we need to be willing to burn. That, I think there's a Viktor Frankl quote, again, man who survived the Holocaust, which is, in order for something to bear light, there has to be some combustion, there has to be some burning, and we resist that. So we live in this age of darkness, like you cited, this meaningless existence that so many people take to be objectively real, and that is such a fucking catastrophe. Where it's like you are living, your meaningless void is projected onto the backdrop of a goddamn miracle. You know what I mean? And it seems real, but this place, again, it is what we make it. So it's like, can we be willing to feel again? That includes whatever, I'm a failure, life fucking sucks, this is meaningless, I should kill myself. All of these dark things we say, avoid, avoid, avoid. What if you flip that on its head and you go straight into that shit like a fucking gangster and you sink your teeth into it? You're like, give me that darkness. And from the Buddhist lens, we would actually find that it's not the darkness that hurts so bad, it's our resistance to the darkness. That actually creates suffering, that creates numbness, that creates dissociation, this meaningless place where I don't feel anything. Interesting. Why? Because of our hedonistic aversion to pain, our hedonistic, culturally conditioned mentality where if I feel discomfort, I feel awkward, I feel painful, I get rejected by some chick I ask out. If I avoid that my whole life, good luck finding a partner. You know what I mean? You gotta be willing to taste that pain.
Yep.
And interestingly, if I can just be with it, yeah, that girl fucking denied me, like her boyfriend's probably like way richer than me and cooler, and yeah, that kind of fucking sucks, but I'm gonna get him next time. You know what I mean? That's where you start to build.
Amen.
And that's where, amen, brother. And that's where you get that fire of combustion, of like, ooh, that sucked, but now I can see clearly. Now I can see clearly, maybe I gotta work on, you know, how I spit game, or like who I interact with.
You get to recreate yourself and find a better way to illuminate yourself. And I'm really getting this interesting candle-lit analogy that seems to be very potent in this conversation of emptiness. And I guess I always think of the masculine and feminine in this regard. This is like something I've thought about, is that the feminine is the void of space-time. That anything can be co-created in the womb of the feminine, but it's really masculine where you actually choose to distinctify the yin of where the star is chosen or where that combustion is, and it's usually through pressure and illumination. So when you have this experience where, like, as Ben is so interpreting it, like, you know, a failed attempt where like you're not being received in one way, how can I redefine myself? How can I re-illuminate myself to be received in the right light, and actually maybe empower myself to feel a higher vibration of illumination, to be, you know, attract the moth, be the flame, not the moth, if you will, in this analogy. And so that could be looked at in a multitude of platforms, but I think some of the results we're trying to find in this emptiness, or maybe as a society, is to find our own divine accordance with that light. Because once you have that for yourself, you are basically, and I'm hearing a biblical quote here, someone's going to know it in the chat, but that you will be illuminated with your own sense of your connection to God, so to speak, that is given to you.
And can I ask what God is to you? What is your direct connection to God?
Different chain of thought.
Because it's such a loaded word.
It's so loaded. As I have experienced life through an astrological lens, I have, yes, a Taoist kind of outlook on things, but I have a very pantheistic kind of approach that I really want people to understand that God is experiencing itself through us and everything in the now, and that all is a potential and now, that you are one pixel of the tapestry of all that can be created and with God. And so I believe God is not an abstract thing. It's actually a toroidal field of you are a piece of God, because anything that I co-create can be shared, and I can change the environment and create or destroy in some ways. But I think there's a vibratorial connection where we are connected as one and with the earth and beyond, that you are not separate. And so like that oneness is actually, holy moly, beyond. And I know that is really triggering for people that want to create it as an ideological person, place, or thing, if you will. But I think that God is really kind of, you are more connected, and I think it's healthy to have the archetypes for humans to pray to, if a deity, so to speak. But I believe they're basically just very abstract kind of elemental like elemental energies basically that are coming down in very astral ways that are creating everything. But I don't think you should segregate yourself as you are not a piece of God in one's vessel to experience itself through you.
Well, I mean, you said so many, I would say, angles actually of God, and so we can view God as self, and I was kind of pointing to some of that earlier, which is like, who speaks through you? Beyond the senses of ego, self, Ben, human, beyond the labels, who is speaking through you? What is speaking through you? What moves your body? Where did you come from? Where are you going? So that's one lens. We could say this being that we are experiencing, we're both experiencing, and we're experiencing life through simultaneously. This being is God. So again, can we honor these desires, these wills, the will to connect, the will to move, to create? Who is creating? Who wants to connect? And who are we to get in the way? So we can honor the divine and adopt this view, which is more of a recognition of what you could call theophany, which is an expression of divinity. And when you recognize, again, it's more of a recognition than a cultivation. When you recognize that you are an expression of source, again, this changes experience dramatically. It changes how you interact with your desires. It changes how you interact with your ambition. Again, don't get in the way. Let it go. Let it go. It's also self-love and self-hate. When we recognize self as theophany, who are you hating? Who do you hate? You hate God, you hate creation, you hate the conditions that formed you. Seems kind of silly, huh? And it takes a lot of work to kind of get to that sometimes, because there's layers of, you could call it karma actually, in the way of that recognition. But
consciousness or timelines of, you know, what I hate that happened to me in this level, on a higher level, it's probably to serve a higher purpose. Yeah. And I think we don't pay attention to that enough. I will say from an astrological point of view that it's, a good day for a lion is not a good day for a zebra.
That's fucking valid.
But who can say that that's not the best thing for the biome and the environment that is taking place? Yeah. It's not for me to identify, but there usually is an arithmetic that has served consciousness in a perpetual motion. So, Ben, I think there's a lot there.
I know, bro. We'll just have to save it for later.
I'm psyched.
Yeah, my man. This was dope.